One of the things that Chris Eubank Jr. seems to be most proud of, and it's also one of the things that the public are most impressed by when it comes to Chris Eubank Jr., is the fact that he trains all year round. You often hear him saying in interviews that there are no days off. The guy is always in shape. He's always shredded, in immaculate physical condition. And this is generally seen as a good thing. George Groves, on the other hand, when people have mentioned this to him, has kind of scoffed at the fact that Eubank Jr. trains all year round and laughed at it. George Groves, from what I can discern from what he's said in these interviews, believes that Chris Eubank Jr. is in a perpetual state of being burnt out. I think this is something George Groves truly believes, that actually training year round as hard as Eubank Jr. does actually depletes him and does more harm than good. The fact that he doesn't have a long rest period after training camps. George Groves believes that the fact that he has time off away from the gym where he's not doing any training gives his body time to recover and replenish. And so when he goes back into training camp, he's full of energy and he's rejuvenated. Now, the term that people use for when you are basically run down and lack energy because of all the training you're doing, they say that you are overtrained. And this is something which I personally have experienced. So I've heard some people say they don't think being overtrained exists. It definitely exists. I've experienced it myself. When I used to train, sometimes I've trained very, very intensely, 5-6 days a week, 2 times a day. And I do this for several weeks. And after several weeks, I'd find that I had nothing left in the gym. When I first started out on the training camp, if you want to call it that, doing all this intense boxing work, the cardio, the bag work, the running, the sprints, the push-ups, the sit-ups, the sparring. When I was doing all this kind of stuff, at the start of camp, the first few weeks, I'd be full of energy. While coming towards the end of it, let's say it was a 8, 9, 10-week period, I'd go into the gym and I wouldn't even be able to do half of what I was doing 4 or 5 weeks ago. That is when you are overtrained. That's when your body needs a rest. When you've pushed yourself beyond the limits and your body is saying no more. We need a rest to recover and replenish the energy stores. Now, I say all that to say this. I looked at Chris Eubank Jr.'s open workout footage today, and he's looked like this in many of his public workouts, to be fair. But it looked to me as though he was pushing his punches, that he was making a real effort to get the punches out. The punches weren't coming out smooth and easy. He was forcing them out. Even though a lot of them were fast, he was forcing them out. And if you notice when he hits the pads and when he's hitting the body shield that his pad man is wearing, there's quite a pause between when the guy tells him to punch and when Eubank Jr. actually punches, as if he's gathering his energy, forcefully gathering his energy and then putting it into all the punches. It's not a smooth transition, and there's a gap there between when he's told to punch and when he does punch, a noticeable gap. With George Groves, on the other hand, I saw his public workout and his punches seem much more sharp in a certain sense. And I don't mean sharp as in they were faster necessarily, but there was a shorter time between when Shane McGuigan told him to punch and when he did punch. He just seemed to have a faster reaction time and his punches didn't seem to be as forced. So there might be something to this notion that Chris Eubank Jr. is overtrained. Because this is something George Groves seems to believe. And it's something which the evidence of the public workouts might actually seem to support as well. Does that mean that George Groves is going to win the fight? I guess we'll find out on Saturday. But one thing I can say is that I was more impressed with Groves on the pads than Eubank on the pads. But you can look incredible on the pads. It don't mean you're going to look incredible in the ring. That's one thing I've learned time and time again over the years of watching this sport of boxing. But it is something to look at for yourselves. And as it goes, I felt like George Groves looked sharper on the pads than I've seen him for years. And you'd have to imagine he would be, because this is the biggest fight Groves has been in for years. A domestic grudge match on pay-per-view. And according to Kalle Sauer and his promoter, if George Groves wins, because in the World Boxing Super Series, the winner gets more money than the loser. If George Groves wins, Kalle says it will basically be the biggest purse of Groves' career as far as he's aware, because he wasn't necessarily privy to all the purses that Groves had before, but as far as he's aware, it will be Groves' biggest purse. So it's essentially Groves' biggest fight. And therefore, you have to imagine he's going to train harder than ever before, dedicate himself harder than ever before. And I think that's evident if you watch his public workout today. He looked very sharp. He was keeping his shape very well. There was lots of bounce and spring in his legs. I was impressed with what I saw from George Groves. And based upon that, the pattern that most people see emerging in this fight of Groves having success early and really controlling the fight in the early rounds, I'm more convinced now that that's going to happen than I was prior to seeing this public workout. Just seeing how sharp Groves looked and how Eubank Jr. looked as though he was really forcing his punches. And also the shape of both men. I'm not talking about their physical shape. I'm talking about their shape as in their boxing stance. Groves has a boxing stance, if you watch that pad work, which is conducive to landing hard, explosive punches from long range. Whereas Eubank Jr.'s boxing stance is not conducive for that, for landing hard punches at long range. Everything he was doing was short punches. Even his right hand, he doesn't fully extend it. He throws it with a bent arm. That's apparently because he's got a chronic elbow injury in his right elbow. So he can't fully extend his right arm. But, you know, to add, and that's why he's developed this uppercut apparently. But to add to all that, the way he positions his body isn't as conducive, you know, to boxing at long range as Groves is, the way Groves positions his body. And again, you can notice that if you watch the open workouts of both men, which took place today. Interesting. So yeah, I think early on, Groves is going to be winning the rounds. That's what I see. As the fight progresses, has Groves trained hard enough to overcome the stamina issues that he had earlier on in his career if the fight goes that long? I guess we'll find out. But Eubank Jr. is the guy who can come out with combinations, bursts of punches, late in fights, and prevail. He's the guy who's done that before. George Groves' late in fights tends to look very ragged and sloppy. After watching the open workouts, I'm actually tempted to change my prediction again and pick Groves. But I'm not going to. I'm going to stick with Eubank Jr. But I am tempted because I was much more impressed with Groves on the pads than I was with Eubank Jr. just in terms of sharpness, the shape. You know, again, it's not necessarily the hand speed, because sharpness is, to me, the reaction time. Groves' reaction time seemed quicker to me on the pads than Eubank Jr.'s reaction time. His punches seemed to come out more smoothly and naturally, whereas Eubank Jr. seemed to be forcing his work. Everything was forced. So that's what I'm talking about there. So even though I'm tempted to pick Groves, especially after seeing the public workout, I'm not going to. I'm going to stick with Eubank Jr. I think he'll probably find a way to win somehow. I think this is going to be a tough, close, competitive fight. And it may turn out to be, I think it will definitely turn out to be the toughest fight that Eubank Jr. has ever had. Definitely. That is one thing I'm convinced of. This will be by far the toughest fight Eubank Jr. has ever been in. I don't know whether it'll be the toughest fight Groves has been in, because he's been in a lot of tough fights. The first fight with Froch was tough towards the end. The fight with Badou Jack was very tough. The James DeGale fight was tough. He's been in a lot of tough fights. So I don't know whether this will be Groves' toughest, but it will definitely be Eubank Jr.'s toughest, even if he wins. That's my prediction. We'll find out if I'm right on Saturday. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the public workout. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Maybe you've got a totally different interpretation in terms of what you saw. George Groves has this explosive style, this power punching style, which lends itself to fighting in explosive bursts, but he can't sustain a work rate all, 3 minutes of a round for 12 rounds. Now, he claims Eubank Jr. can't either, but Eubank Jr. in terms of punch volume throws way more punches than George Groves, from what I've seen. So I'm not saying he can punch non-stop at full power for 3 minutes a round for 12 rounds. No, Eubank Jr. can't do that. But generally, he throws more shots than George Groves. Groves is a guy who moves around the ring, jumps in with fast explosive shots, then he's trying to move around and recover, then jump in with fast explosive shots when he sees an opportunity. That's how Groves tends to fight. There have been some fights where Groves turned down the power and turned up the volume. I think the Rabras fight was a good example of that. But I don't expect him to do that in this fight. I expect this fight Groves to be fairly low volume with power punches, but, use his legs a lot and then jump in when he sees the opportunity with that powerful right hand of his. So, yeah, I think it's going to be Groves winning the early rounds, Eubank Jr. trying to claw his way back into it and take the fight by the scruff of the neck. You might see anxious moments in Eubank Jr.'s corner. You might see Eubank Jr. hurt. You might see Eubank Jr. even go down. But I just feel like he'll get back up, or he'll recover from being hurt. Groves won't be able to finish him, and Eubank Jr. will find a way to prevail, either on a very close points decision or by stopping George Groves late. It couldn't even be on cuts. George Groves has been cut in several fights. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out.